The latest suspense movie God's Mistake, directed by Spanish reversal master Errs Paul, has officially been released. If you don't have much concept of this director, then you will definitely be familiar with some of his representative works, such as classic films such as Invisible Guests, Mirages, and Innocence. This film still continues his ultimate style of suspense and reversal. Without further ado, the main film begins at a famous psychiatric hospital, where a patient named Alice arrives. Her noble and elegant demeanor seems somewhat out of place with the term mental illness. Dr. Bell in the hospital found that each medical record had her husband's handwritten signature while reviewing the patient's information. The attending physician who suggested that she come to this hospital also wrote a letter about Alice's condition, which stated that Alice is a woman who loves to lie and has a rare ability to make it difficult to distinguish whether her words are true or false after lying. Next, Dr. Bell and Alice had a brief conversation and learned that Alice had been exposed to a difficult-to-detect poison from her husband for a long time. After being discovered, her husband personally sent her here. At the end of the conversation, Dr. Bell's conclusion was that she was a pure paranoid. Not long after, another female doctor named Carter walked over. Dr. Bell said that Carter would take her to familiarize herself with the hospital situation and change clothes. Through Carter's introduction, Alice learned that this is a hospital that advocates modern psychiatry. Patients are not usually restricted in their freedom, but the doors are locked after 10 p.m. The next morning, when she handed in her belongings, Alice asked Dr. Carter for a book she carried with her. Carter saw the symptoms and types of paranoia in the book and didn't think much about it, so she directly gave it to him. After a series of examinations and grooming, Alice, who had changed her clothes, was locked in her room. With the lights off in the hospital, it's time to rest at night. While the on-duty nurse was not paying attention, Alice suddenly took out fragments of newspapers from the home page of that book. It was only through the information in the newspaper that Alice came here voluntarily. She was entrusted by someone to investigate a mysterious case of a young man's death. The next day while eating, a patient named William suddenly walked up to Alice. It turned out that Alice's seat had always been William's exclusive seat, but William didn't pay much attention. Instead, he enthusiastically chatted with Alice. Judging from the way and tone of the man's speech, he wasn't as crazy as other patients. Just as they were communicating, a dwarf man suddenly startled Alice. He was hiding under the table, looking lewd. William was about to step forward and teach the other party a lesson, but their protector was a very tall and burly man. Seeing that he couldn't beat the other party at all, William could only warn Zhu Runan a few words before bringing Alice outside to continue chatting. This man obviously has a special channel because he can get some cigarettes, alcohol, and other things that others don't have. Under his introduction, Alice saw a pair of twins named Dalu and Xiaolu. Xiaolu liked to imitate other people's movements, while Dalu couldn't speak and seemed to have a big problem with her brain. Sitting next to him was a girl who was also foolish. Dalu and Xiaolu treated her like their own sister. In the following days, Alice familiarized herself with the patients in the hospital while trying to find clues about the young man who died mysteriously, but it seemed that progress was not going smoothly. On that day, Alice was once again taken to a room where a clinical supervisor named Jill was going to conduct some tests on him to determine the severity of Alice's condition. However, during the test, Jill found that Alice was able to answer almost all of her questions fluently, and it was impossible to tell from the conversation that she was mentally ill, which also aroused Jill's strong curiosity. A few days later, while making handmade toys, Alice suddenly saw the dwarf man bullying another woman. When he walked out and saw, only the frightened female patient was left. Angry Alice looked for the direction provided by the woman and took a piece of wood to a nearby grove. She decided to teach the little thing a lesson, but to her surprise, it secretly attacked Alice. Taking advantage of Alice's lack of reaction, Zhu Runan quickly crawled over and knocked her unconscious. When Alice woke up again, she found herself tied up. The doctor next to her suddenly said, "The dwarf man has died, and Alice is the only one beside him." Alice was stunned when she heard this, and he began to try hard to recall, but he only remembered that Zhu Runan wanted to invade him at that time, as if someone had attacked him from behind. Alice hopes Jill can help him break free from his constraints. Meanwhile, the director of the hospital, Alva, returned and wanted to have a private conversation with Alice. After Jill left, Alva untied Alice's shackles and the two began formal communication. Alice thought that the dean should be aware of her true identity, because his employer, Dr. Mo, had told Alice before coming that he had already explained the situation to Dean Alva, and only the dean knew Alice's identity. Therefore, she now hopes that Dean Alva can help her investigate this situation. However, Dean Alva suddenly stated that he had never had any contact with Dr. Mo, and that Alice had been transferred here through formal procedures, and now it appears that he has serious delusions. This statement directly angered Alice. He angrily rebuked Alva for lying and went outside to pick up the phone to contact Dr. Mo, but Alva stopped him and called for 2 caregivers to come over. Alice saw something was going wrong and pushed Alva down directly, then prepared to forcibly escape from here. However, in the end, she was caught by the caregivers, and Alva also injected him with a sedative. By the time Alice regained consciousness, she had already been locked in the room as a patient. Dr. Carter came to visit him and took out the newspaper fragments mixed in his book. Alice revealed her identity to her. She really didn't have any mental illness, everything was fabricated to enter here. Unexpectedly, the truth was not only not found, but she also fell into a murder case. Alice hoped that Dr. Carter could hold an explanatory meeting where she would reveal all the truth. With Dr. Carter's advice, Dean Alva, Dr. Gill, and Dr. Bell jointly held an explanatory meeting with Alice. Alice first apologizes to all the doctors. He shouldn't have deceived everyone in this way. Then he recounted how he came here. At a previous party, Alice met Dr. Mo through her husband's introduction. In the following time, Alice learned that his son had committed suicide in a mental hospital, but Dr. Mo firmly believed that his son would not commit suicide without reason. Just a few days ago, someone anonymously sent a letter to Dr. Mo, which read, "You killed him, not me." Dr. Mo believed that someone wanted to harm him by taking away his favorite person, so he told the police about it. But the police don't believe it, but they confirm that the killer must be in this hospital. Dr. Mo hoped that Alice could help him, and after consulting some information, Alice also decided to enter this hospital to find out the truth. Therefore, she began to discuss with Dr. Mo how to enter it. Dr. Mo stated that he has a good relationship with Dean Alva and has already contacted Dean Alva in advance, who is also willing to cooperate. Next, Alice created a mental health club for herself, which was full of lies but highly convincing, and then convinced the so-called attending physician to transfer to this hospital in his name. Next, just take care of your husband and sign it. Alice mixed the information of the case with the insurance policy, and then had her husband sign all of her names. She temporarily left home under the guise of a business trip, and then arrived here. After Alice finished speaking, Alva still didn't believe his statement because he had never contacted Dr. Mo and believed that Alice had fabricated this lie to get out of guilt. Alice, however, stated that she was also a victim. As for the murder of someone like a man, there must have been someone else. She then spoke to Dr. Carter next to her and said that Dean Alva had collaborated with others to forge official documents from the Poetic Society in order to get her into the hospital. Although she didn't know why he didn't admit it, as long as the police came over, they would definitely be able to investigate thoroughly. Then Alice began to accuse Alva of his incompetence. If it weren't for his negligence in management, no one would have died in the hospital. Faced with Alice's constant accusations, Alva was unusually angry. He thinks Alice is very smart, but as a patient, he still needs to take responsibility for his lies because at this point, the other doctors have started to slowly believe Alice's words. Afterwards, Alva and several attending doctors in the hospital began to discuss. Only he insisted that Alice was a patient, but others felt it was necessary to investigate Alice's words. If a healthy person was accidentally detained, it would have a huge impact on the entire hospital. On Alice's case, it is written that she poisoned her husband for a long time before being sent here. Now, all you need to do is contact Alice's husband, Dr. Mo, and her attending doctor to verify the situation. Dean Alva suddenly asked the crowd, would they rather believe a patient than themselves? Dr. Carter firmly stated that either we need to find the police or contact these people. Not long after, an old man appeared in the hospital. Dr. Carter said they had contacted Alice's husband, but couldn't reach him. The attending doctor seemed to have gone abroad, and the only thing they found was the old man in front of them. Alva questioned Alice if she knew him or not. Alice looked at it for a while and then firmly stated that she didn't know him, but the old man said he was Dr. M.O., who had never entrusted Alice to enter this hospital and didn't even know him. At this moment, Alice was lost in confusion. His breathing began to become disorganized, and he firmly stated that the person was not Dr. M.O., but Carter said that he was indeed Dr. M.O. Alice collapsed and shouted, "This must be a trap. Someone must be trying to frame herself." The doctors present already had doubts about him, and Dean Alva took the opportunity to call for 2 caregivers. Then, under Alice's constant struggle and roaring voice, he was taken away from here. Dr. Carter couldn't bear to see this scene. In the following days, Alice was considered a patient with extremely severe delusions, and they subjected him to terrifying electrical currents. After experiencing tremendous pain, Alice gradually became a bit dull, but his thoughts seemed to go back to the previous scene. He came to the party again, where he saw the so-called Dr. M.O. and seemed to secretly say hello to her husband. Then her husband introduced her to Dr. M.O. Then the screen turned and Alice saw herself printing her medical records. At that time, in order to prevent her husband from discovering, she deliberately mixed the medical records with the insurance policy. When she sat on the sofa watching her husband sign, she seemed to see that he seemed to have already known all of this. Then, Alice, like a clone, began to carefully search for the loophole in it, finally revealing the shocking secret that shocked her. When he woke up again, he found William and Lou by his side. They seemed very worried about Alice's situation. Dr. Gill breathed a sigh of relief when he saw him wake up, but just as he was about to leave with the 2 of them, Alice used all her strength to stop her. Then Jill found Carter and convinced him to come back to Alice's ward. Alice said she finally understood what was going on. It turned out that it was her husband's trap from beginning to end. She collaborated with the so-called Dr. M.O. to deceive herself and used a fake case to make her voluntarily enter the hospital. No wonder she had been investigating for so long, but there was no trace of the mysterious young man who died. Dr. Gill expressed whether or not to tell Dean Alva that he might have been deceived, but Alice believed that Alva might have been involved, otherwise he wouldn't have targeted himself so badly. Dr. Gill said that this is a very serious accusation, and Alice must provide evidence to prove it. Alice said that as long as she checks her own account and accounts, if her money is missing, then it must be her husband who is manipulating everything behind the scenes. Carter said he will split up with Jill to investigate, but do nothing until they return to avoid arousing suspicion from Dean Alva. So Jill went to investigate Alice's husband and bank account, while Carter sneaked into Dean Alva's office and didn't expect to find a large check that Alice's husband had given Alva here. Just as Carter was shocked, Dean Alva walked in and questioned why the other party would give him so much money. Alva's explanation was that the money was actually donated to the hospital, and every penny was deposited into the hospital's account. Alice on the other side didn't know if she could rely on the doctors here. He decided to escape the hospital on his own and shared his thoughts with a few of his close friends. That night, he sprinkled paint thinner all over the hall and set fire to him. Accompanied by a big fire, the entire hospital was in chaos, and patients who were supposed to sleep fled outside. However, to his surprise, William passed by the room of one of the twins, Xiao Lu, only to find him lying on the ground and dead for a long time. Immediately afterwards, the police rushed to the scene in a hurry. Seeing the police coming, Alice knew it was an opportunity, so she took advantage of the pouring rain and prepared to sneak out. However, as soon as she arrived at the door, a car arrived outside. Alice was mistaken for the gatekeeper and helped her open the door. So, as the car came in, he finally walked out. Seeing freedom right in front of her, Alice seemed a bit excited. However, the woman who just drove in stopped him. The other party claimed to be an interviewer and asked the patient named Xiao Lu how to get to the room. When they heard that one of the twins, Xiao Lu, seemed dead, Alice suddenly walked in again. He remembered a scene before, when things like Nanjing was about to go wrong. It was Xiaolu who saved him. When Dean Alva and Detective arrived outside, they found that the coroner had fainted and his clothes had been replaced by someone else. Then these people quickly arrived at the morgue room and found Alice there, where the detective questioned who he was. Alva stated that this was the most dangerous patient in the hospital, but Alice said that he knew who the killer was. Then he recounted the incident where Zhu Runan attacked him. It was Xiao Lu who accidentally killed the other person and saved himself. However, this scene was seen by the tall man in the hospital, such as the man being the other person's best friend, which was one of the motives for murder. The most important one was that the tall man liked Xiao Lu's sister, but these two brothers prohibited anyone from approaching the girl. So the dissatisfied big man used this taboo to get rid of Xiao Lu, and he also examined Xiao Lu's body. The other party should have caused a wound with sharp broken glass. As long as he found the big man to verify, he could determine whether the other party was the murderer. So Carter and the others quickly found the big man, and when the other party opened their hands, as Alice had said, he was indeed the murderer. So the big man was taken away by the police directly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Alice explained her situation to the detective. Alva still claims that he is a real patient and that he murdered his husband. Detective Ku's assistant suddenly said that today a doctor named Jill came to the police station to report a case. According to his report, the police investigated Alice's husband and found that he did indeed transfer most of Alice's property. Alva had nothing to say about this order, but the detective stated that they could not take Alice away, but they would help explain the situation to the judge. Subsequently, Carter and other doctors approached the dean and proposed another special meeting to determine whether Alice was a normal person or not. The next morning, Alice tidied up her things neatly. Maybe she could finally leave here. Then, in the presence of all the doctors and caregivers in the entire hospital, Alice walked in, followed by a meeting on whether Alice was mentally ill or not. Dean Alva stated that she can only prove that her husband took away her money, but cannot prove that her mental health is not a problem. However, her colleagues strongly believe that Alice is a heavy blow to the psychiatrist. Dean Alva said that he has submitted his resignation to the Ministry of Health. After this matter is over, they can choose another qualified dean, and then the 4 doctors above will communicate with Alice one by one. Finally, Alva asked them to make the final decision on whether they believed Alice was a normal person. Yes. Moonlight. Upon hearing colleagues make the same decision, Alva believed that this could be the biggest mistake made by the board of directors. Then he prepared to leave here, but before leaving, he told everyone that the doctor who had advocated for Alice to be admitted to the hospital had returned from abroad. After his own inquiry, the other party was willing to come here to clarify one thing. Alice showed a strange expression upon hearing this. Then, when Dean Alva left, Alice's first attending doctor came in, and his appearance was exactly the same as Dr. Mo Alice had imagined. This film also ends here. If many people don't understand, then let me briefly summarize that the big reversal at the end seems to indicate that Alice is indeed a mental illness, but she is very smart and good at lying, so much so that she can even deceive herself. Coincidentally, her husband did indeed take away her money. Alice used this to unleash her imagination and successfully brainwashed the 4 members of the hospital. One was that only the dean firmly believed that he was a patient, but in the end, everyone still believed Alice's words. As mentioned in the opening scene, he had a rare ability, which is that after lying, people cannot distinguish whether his words are true or false. If you are interested, you can go and watch the original film. There will be more details waiting for you to explore. Thank you for watching. See you in the next issue.